All right, we're in Deuteronomy 17. Finish out the chapter.
Wait, I got questions.
Yes, we would get to those.
Okay.
Updates as far as prayer. Yesterday, I shared with you that Steve Horn, who is the executive director of Louisiana, requested prayers for all of Louisiana for the fires that they have down there, drought conditions, and the firemen are overextended. So we joined them in prayer yesterday. I wrote him last night, told him, hey, we prayed for you and with you. And he was very appreciative of that. Hurricane, of course, is coming up. So praying for the impact of that for those that are in its way. Two major earthquakes out in Indonesia, over 7.1 just a couple hours ago. That's the first, I think, 7.0 that we've had for this month, after we was averaging 5-6 per month for the first part of this year. And then the shootings, again, that we talked about for the last 48 hours, those have continued today. They had down there at UNC, they had a shooting. I don't think they ever did find that boy. But there were other places. I think Baltimore had one, and then other places that there were some mass shootings. And then the murder-suicides are trying to catch the mass shootings, but they're both like on a heavy race to see who's going to get to 500 first. So, within the next week, mass shootings will be at 500 for the year, and should easily top 600, which is around the record setting for that, with 3.5 months remaining.
I was talking to a gentleman in Myrtle Beach, and I said I had to go through a professional development on teen suicide. It was one of my professional development things. And he said, I just don't understand suicide. I said, I don't understand murder-suicide. You know, you kill all your family and you kill yourself. He said, a murder-suicide? I've never heard of such a thing.
Where was he from?
I don't know. He was on the beach. We were just chatting.
My goodness.
It's
He said, I can't believe somebody would do that to their families.
yeah.
I
And
said,
again,
it happens a lot more
the
than you think.
rampage of that is, like I said, epidemic proportions with that. Next weekend coming up is Labor Day weekend, and 4-day weekend is just never good, especially for our area. And so continue to pray. More again with the, I noticed last night and then throughout this morning, people found in Cumberland, Hampshire, Hardy, apparently drug overdoses, but unresponsive. I even forgot the one that I never even had. Again, I've read this stuff for quite a while, so I'm a quack, but I still got the terminology down. But this was unresponsive, something breathing.
Unresponsive but still breathing. Yeah. In other words, they would.
No, it wasn't that. I'd never seen it before. And the phrasing of it, I was just like, wow, I've never seen that before. So anyway, those have been on an increase in our area with that. Schools, again, what I shared about Friday night, the shootings aren't in the schools, but they're at the football games, the high school football games. And then down at UNC today, they had that shooting on campus. Wounded but not dead, as far as last I heard with that. So that's all I have for this time. Anything else? Requests, needs?
I just want to share that my aunt is getting worse. I tried to talk to her about what happened to me last week, and all she could say was, love Kristen, love Kristen. So it's
Limited and fading.
It's fading fast.
All right, let's open up in prayer. Announcements are everything's on schedule except for next week. Again, is Labor Day on Monday night, so we won't have Bible study next week. But going into September, there's nothing unusual. Prayer this Sunday being the first Sunday with the pastors. A couple of them are out of town. And September just is quiet till the end of it. I have a prayer link meeting in Tennessee, so we'll see how that goes. All right, Jacob, you want to open us? You want me to?
I can open. Holy Father, we thank you for this opportunity to be together in your name. Lord, I pray that you just go before us and guide us in this Bible study. Father, I pray that you would just open our minds and our hearts to new understandings, Lord, that we would better understand you and who you are. Lord, we just thank you for the ability to gather together. In Jesus' name, amen.
All right. Questions?
Lamentations. First of all, I just want to say it is beautifully written. It is a poem and it is beautifully written and very easy to read and understand. I thought I was going to cry again when they brought Jeremiah back into it because I was poor Jeremiah yet again. But it flip-flopped back and forth so much. Like somehow we started out God's angry and by the end we get to hope.
Yeah. Again, understanding that as Jeremiah writes this, so you start off in chapter 1, and again, it's 5 chapters, so it's
Yeah,
quick
it's not
read.
long. Yeah.
But you start off with, to me, like chapter 1, verse 12, which I've memorized and know. Is it nothing to you, all you that pass by, behold and see what the Lord has done to us, judgment? Because remember, he got to sit during the beginning when he was just
Yes.
a kid, during the days of revival with Josiah, and then he had to watch for decades until they got to the end with Zedekiah, who wouldn't listen to nothing. And then he had to watch the entire city be destroyed. Then he got carried off into Egypt to tell them, as to say, ain't none of you coming out of here. And that's the last we hear of him. But he saw all that. So he saw the blessings of God and he saw the wrath of God. And he starts with the wrath, and the only portion of scripture, which is really funny if you ever listen to people that, and it's a rare thing for anybody ever to preach out Lamentations, but if you catch them, they always quote chapter 3 because it is the only chapter of hope and promises in the midst of that. They always like the good verses. No, not too many likes to quote out of the other.
Yeah.
I say, hey, there's a couple more chapters there, but they only quote in chapter 3. Let's see if I can find it real quick. From verse 22 down through 36. It is of the Lord's mercies that we are not consumed, because his compassions fail not. They are new every. The great is thy faithfulness. Everybody loves to quote that.
Yes.
But they don't quote anything before it, and
Or
they don't
anything
quote
after
anything after it. But
Just those words.
that's Lamentations. And there was hope that even after Jeremiah was gone, that God was going to restore them and bring them back. And he did. And that was during the days of Ezra and Nehemiah. So what was the question out of Lamentations?
So my question is, first of all, who wrote Lamentations? Do you
Jeremiah.
know? Jeremiah wrote it. Okay.
That was his.
So why
Sorrow.
did he? I mean, he did write poetry in a poetic form in Jeremiah, and he also wrote in a narrative form. But this one is all poetry. Is there any particular reason why?
I don't think it's what you would call poetry as much as just the prophecy of what he's conveying to them for what the Lord has
The
said.
way it reads, I mean, I would definitely call this. I wouldn't call Songs of Solomon as good as this. But anyway, so I get over to chapter 4. So, like you said, there's all this hope stuff, and then I get over to chapter 4, and it says God's anger is satisfied. So, oh, no, that's too far. The punishment of my, this is verse 6. Oh no, verse 4, I'm sorry. Because of the thirst, the infant's tongue sticks to the roof of its mouth. The children beg for bread, but no one gives it to them. And so, like, that satisfies God.
The judgment on the city. He's making a declaration of what that judgment looks like. when he takes the food away because he sent famine and he sent drought. And they're in the cities because they've been shut in there by the Babylonians and surrounded for years now. Matter of fact, I think it was 1 year and 3 months that they were in there. Some point your water runs out, some point your food runs out, and you're left with nothing. And this is the picture of that in that.
Okay.
So again, and it's like you said, it's a poetic style of declaring what God did and what God allowed upon them for their judgments. Verse 6, for the punishment of the iniquity of the daughter of my people is greater than the punishment of the sin of Sodom. Because again, Sodom was instantaneous. This was duration. And again,
but they had a chance to get out before
oh my,
they were blocked in there.
they had 11 years with Jehoiakim, and he begged and pleaded with him. He was the one that took the penknife and cut up all the parchments of the word and burned it in the fire, and then declared, hey, go kill Jeremiah, and they couldn't find him.
Yeah.
Zedekiah comes. He's there for 11 years. He's told, go out and surrender yourself to them, you and your family, and the city will be preserved, the temple will be preserved, your family will be preserved. Wouldn't listen. So he holds up, and then finally he breaks through. He tries to run. They catch him. They take him before Nebuchadnezzar. They kill all of his sons in front of him. And then they put his eyes out, and then he's left in chains for the rest of his days. All because he had ears to hear, but he wouldn't hear. And that's the picture of this.
Okay. Well,
Okay?
I was happy and then I was sad.
Yeah, it's a roller coaster.
It is. Okay, so Ezekiel chapter 1. Now, in my version, it never came out and said, this is an angel. Is it an angel?
At which point? There's
It says,
two.
verse 4, it says, I looked and I saw a windstorm coming out of the north, an immense cloud with flashing lights and surrounded by brilliant light. The center of the fire looked like glowing metal. Yeah, it's on down through there.
Verse 5. You have the first phrase as well.
Yeah. And in the fire was what looked like 4 living creatures.
Okay. So where else in the scriptures do we have 4 living creatures?
Revelation.
In the throne room of God, above him, there are the 4 beasts, and they have all 4 different faces. The faces of what?
An eagle,
A lion,
lion,
a man,
a man,
and
a cow,
a calf.
calf.
Yeah. So those are the 4 faces, and they all have 6 wings. All other angels have 4 wings. They have 6 that binds them around at their feet, and then the other ones that
Oh,
carry
in
them.
the back they carry with.
So that same comparison.
Okay.
So we're dealing with angels, isn't it?
Okay.
It's when you get over to 19, 20, somewhere down to, I'd have to look at it here real close, where the wheels appear. And in the wheels is the glory of God, the glory Shekinah in that, because all the other wheels are different of the living creature except for God.
So yeah, 19 says, when living creatures moved, the wheels beside them moved, and when the living creatures rose from the ground, the wheels also rose.
So you
Yeah.
have a bunch of angels there with the 4 living spirits, which are the same angels on these wheels operating. Verse 26, and above the heavens, the firmament, the likeness of the throne. So in the sapphire stone, which is also in Revelation 4, when John says, and I saw, and there was a door open to me, and when John was exited into, and the same thing, a vision, he's exited into it, and he says, and I saw a throne, and he that sat upon him was he that liveth forever and ever. And he gives that same description. I don't know. I've not studied. I know I should. I have not studied the stones. You have all the emeralds and the
Rubies.
jewels and the rubies, but sapphire is what's mentioned here. And I think it's also what's mentioned in Revelation 4, that the glory of God emanates and I say it's as glory Shekinah as a sapphire stone, which is reddish, isn't it?
No, it's blue.
Blue is sapphire.
Mm-hmm.
So that image in itself is something else with that. But we're comparing what Ezekiel saw at the river of Chebar and what's in Revelation 4 and 5 of the throne
Okay.
of God.
So these 4 angels. Well, first let me ask, how many archangels are there?
No idea.
How many are named?
Aren't there different types of angels?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the reason I said archangel.
Yeah. There's the 4 beasts, the 4 living creatures, and then you have the other host, which again, Gabriel and Michael are the only 2 names that I'm associated with. So I don't know the count of number, and I don't know
Okay.
positions.
All right.
I don't think that's revealed anywhere, actually.
Well, maybe I just have to study that for myself then.
And then you come tell us.
Okay.
Well, if you read down from 26 down to the end, that's not angels, that's God.
That's God.
And that's his divine visitation. And
And
then
what verse did you say that was? Starting at what verse?
26 through 28, the very last 3 verses.
26.
All the rest
Okay.
of that is the angels, the angelic hosts that are visiting him. Then in chapter 2, he starts his dialogue, and he said unto me.
Well, that's the other part I was going to ask you about. He said unto me, meaning God said to him, right? To Ezekiel.
Correct. God is speaking to him as the
Okay.
prophet. He said, this is what you're going to go do, and this is what you're going to go say. And then he takes his ability to speak away from him and says, you will not be allowed to talk on your own. And that's through most of the book of Ezekiel. He was never allowed to talk unless it was a prophetic word from the Lord to the people of God.
Oh my gosh, I don't know what I do.
Tell me what you do when you get, how far are you up into Ezekiel?
I finished chapter 3 last night.
Oh, you don't got
I'm
Wait
starting-
till you see when he tells him to lay on his side, on his right side or his left side for 397 days.
Oh my gosh.
And then he has to lay on his right side for 40 some days and declare it to the people. And he's only allowed to eat dung and drink a little bit of water. What are you looking
I
at,
would
man? You never read the book
I
of
would
Ezekiel?
rather eat the locusts.
Yes, I have. But
What'd you all
I
have for
think
supper?
reading and hearing is 2
Yeah.
different things.
So I'm getting ready to read chapter 4, and it says the siege of Jerusalem symbolized. What does that mean? Symbolized. Why are they using that?
He sets out again, and this time frame is the same time frame as the end of Jeremiah.
Okay.
So they're overlapping.
Okay.
Ezekiel's at the river of Chebar, which is northeast of Jerusalem in Israel. Of course, Jeremiah is in the midst of it.
Yeah.
At the end, where the Babylonians ransack and demolish Jerusalem, then he comes to Ezekiel and says it's finished. But he is still a prophet to those. If you remember, Judah is there in the land, even though there are some that escape. Israel is the ones in 712 BC were the ones that were carried away by the Assyrians.
Okay.
So this is a lot of that remnant of the children of Israel, not the children of Judah.
Oh, okay.
So they are in this land living, but they are vagabonds because they've been removed from the promised land.
All right.
So enjoy.
Well, I'll tell you that first chapter, like I read it 2 or 3 times, trying to get this picture in my head of.
Yeah, what it looked like.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, the circles and the wheels and
Yeah,
all that.
all
I
that.
tell you, yeah, I spend a lot of time trying to invoke what that would look like in the midst of it.
So that's all of my questions. Somebody else.
All right. Anybody else?
So I was listening to Paul Washer the other night, and I've noticed a lot of preachers reference American Christianity as like Western Christianity. So 2 questions of that. One, is it wrong to do that when technically we're all supposed to be one under the bride. Like we're all the bride of Christ, all true Christians.
You mean worldwide
Yeah.
versus just Western Hemisphere?
Yeah.
I think it's because he's who he's addressing in his context when he says Western civilization, the North American church. You'll find that I don't even say that anymore. I don't say the United States. I say North America. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay,
I
but
don't.
it's not to. I'm not limiting Asia or Africa or that, but our brand of Christianity is different than what's in Asia.
Mhm.
As a matter of fact, I would rather do it the way Asia's doing it than the way we do it.
Well, that's my
We're
problem.
so based on entertainment,
Human.
humanism. They're based on persecution,
Yeah.
and they have to worship with what they have, and it's the Bible, it's prayer, and again they're unity. They sing, and there's no time limits. Our structure in the Western civilization is what he's referencing, the way we've done church,
Mhm.
and his condemnation on that. His 10 indictments, the 10 indictments that he preached when I was down there in Atlanta, is what that's Western civilization, Western culture.
Well, that's my follow-up is what's the big difference between, because I know Western is more humanism and more so about us than about God, and I know them, like we said, they're being persecuted and they don't have the freedoms. Do you think it will take that for the United States to, have that?
I say no, but, and this is the reason that I always get in an argument, because most people say there's no other way to redeem the North American church than through persecution. It has to happen. This is the only way. And I'm like, no, it's not the only way. If we would experience the revival that I talk about, we wouldn't have to go through persecution. Matter of fact, my whole vendetta of nonstop for revival is to save you from having to go through that. That's why I do what I do. I don't want you guys to have to go through that nightmare. You will live Lamentations. And these people say there's no other way for the church to be purged. There's no other way for us to be made, the bride to be made ready than persecution. If that's the will of the Lord, that's the will of the Lord. I accept that. But I don't believe that. I believe that if a revival would come, is that it can change. It could change the church without having to go through persecution. Why would you want to go through that? And that's what I'm against.
Because it would create a pure religion again, where all that you would need is to be assembling yourselves together and hearing the word of God and being in prayer.
Bible focused and
Right.
prayer focused. Yeah.
I guess I struggle with like I understand God's grace and there's no bound, but I mean look at what our country has allowed. And I don't want to say this wrong, but like for God to give us a revival after all we've done, rather than persecution, like to fathom that kind of grace, I struggle with that.
Well, if you listen to, I went back and did this, and I encourage you guys to do it. J. Edwin Orr on YouTube. And when it comes up, there's normally, he preached series of sermons. If you go listen to 1792 of Europe and North America, United States, and you listen to the conditions of 1792 that he details in history, where alcoholism was out of control, profanity was the rule of the land. He said there was violence. He said God, there was diminishing of all the Christianity. There was European philosophers that were saying the church will be dead in 30 years. We won't have to worry about Christianity anymore. And he said, and at that moment, suddenly, at its worst, its darkest, that's when God shows up.
Yeah.
And it's like, we're not there, but we're on the crisp of that. So it is to me that still the longing and the hope for revival is to see, and again, revival is about God's glory. It's not just about getting us out of trouble.
Yeah.
I'm not looking for a get out of jail card. But the will of the Lord be done for his kingdom, for his name, and revival to get the church back to where it's supposed to be. So that's why I look at that. J. Edwin Orr, O-R-R. He was a revival historian, probably one of the best. Richard Owen Roberts, that you hear me talk about, come up on him.
1780 what?
1792.
92.
He does all of them. He does all the revivals from 1730s to the 1790s to the 1830s, 1850s, 1904-05, the Welsh revival. He's just an historian. If you listen to it, it's good stuff. And they're only about 25 minutes, so it's not like long. It's not like Richard Owen where you listen to him for 2 hours.
When
Say, let's get started.
when did it change that Christians felt we needed to hide?
1980s, 1990s. We come out of that where you had family church, where most Sundays, what we talk about, everybody was in church on Sunday together, then they'd go home and they'd have supper together, lunch together, and they'd hang out and family time together. But everything changed. And again, you look at the changes of history, it began with Sunday afternoon football, televised. It began with entertainments of those things. So they stopped church. And again, the 1980s, church attendance started to drop. It was family worship stopped, and it was the individuals. And then there was a breakage at that time period. It's been in our generations that this has changed. Everything, the blue laws made an impact in the 1980s. I don't know. I remember Maryland when they did it.
That
So.
happened in the 70s.
Okay. All right. Anything else?
That's not in the New Testament, is it? That's not in the New Testament about tithing in the New Covenant.
Tithing. Acts chapter 4, when the church began in the New Testament, and it says, and they brought such as was needed. Old Testament, you have the 10% with Jacob or Abraham giving to Melchizedek 10%, Jacob promising, I will pay you 10%, but there's no percentage. What?
They gave everything they had, right?
They brought and they gave, some people gave land, some people just gave everything, but they gave such as was needed. So whatever the need was, they met it in that. But there wasn't percentages. We teach discipleship that there was a percentage to begin people, but it increases for as the need was. You know, Philip talking about a preacher that gave X amount of dollars to this mission project down there in Florida. He said, oh, this guy gave, I said, well, he goes to every Alabama football game. I said, how many thousands of dollars do you think those are? I said, he's given his chump change, not his tithe or overflow. But anyway. Okay. Any other questions?
That goes along with, it was the parable, right, that Jesus told about the lady who gave the 2 cents and she gave everything she had, or the rich man.
Yeah, and he said
Yeah,
she gave
she
all.
gave all.
They gave of their increase. Right.
So it's the motive of the heart and why you're giving. So because you love God and you just want to advance His kingdom, but if you're giving to get something back, I don't think you should give.
There are a lot of people that will say that if I give, and again, when we're talking about different cultures, I talked about Asia, but if you go into Africa, what they're battling is prosperity preachers. If you give me your tithe, and then God will bless you with 20% increase, and that's fallacy, that's error, that's blasphemy, and you don't.
But doesn't it say in the Bible also that whatever you give, you'll be given back in sevenfold?
Well, but again, it may not be.
I mean, I'm not saying it's money necessarily.
but they look at it for indulgences of here.
Okay.
What does it say? I get nothing here, but in heaven, I will receive my rewards, and that is the benefit of that. We give, and again, it says, as the Apostle Paul says in Corinthians, the Lord loves a cheerful giver. And old Oliver B. Green used to say, he said, but I've watched some of you all tithe, and he said, you put a permanent kink in Abe Lincoln's beard, holding on to it, trying to drop it in the offering plate. He said, that's not a cheerful giver. He says, you give reluctantly. Because, and then we develop this prosperity stuff, and it's like, oh, well, if you give, then you'll get something out of it. Or they'll say, I got to give my tithes because if not, God will take it out of my hide somewhere down the road, which I'm not saying that he won't, but that's not the right motive for giving. That's not giving out of joyfulness and for the kingdom. Give for the right reasons.
And you can never outgive God anyway.
Absolutely. Right. Linda?
Could that sevenfold that she was talking about might be a sevenfold of holiness or humility or selflessness instead of monetary?
Yes. Yeah. And again, that's like what she said. It's don't limit it to monetary. God can still bless you, but and as Emma said, you can't. I think J.L. Kraft, isn't he the example?
Yes.
He started off giving 10%. His business increased. He was given 90% at the end of it, and he said, "I can't outgive the Lord." And the Lord, so it is be obedient in your tithe.
The Lutheran Synod had a gentleman in to speak when they had the Synod Assembly here in Kaiser. And the reason he was speaking is he received an audit from the IRS because he gave more than he made.
Which to them was suspicious.
Yeah, which was to them very suspicious. But he had a, should I say, a quiver full of children, and they all gave. I mean, it wasn't just him giving for his family; like they all gave. Yeah. And it was an interesting story. I don't remember all of it, but it was something different to hear. I mean, they really raked him over the coals.
The
The
IRS?
did.
No, said he
Yeah,
Okay.
I know.
didn't. All right. Anything else? All right. We'll spend here. Let's get into Deuteronomy 17. Pick up in verse 14. We'll try to go down through this. Chapter 18 is just one page, 22 verses, but there's some things there that's going to take us some time to look at. So let's focus on. We left off verse 13. The three duties, responsibilities that is the same that falls for us. All the people shall hear, fear, and do. No more presumptuously. Now that three instructions: fear, hear, fear, and do. So 17:14, where we left off, and we'll pick up with this. This is all one section, 14 down through 20, which is the close of the chapter. When you are coming to the land which the Lord your God gives you, and you shall possess it and dwell therein, then you shall say, I will set a king over me, like as all the nations that are about me. This is a preemptive instruction of God. God had given them before in the law, you will not have any king to rule over you. I'm the one who rules and reigns over you. You are not to ever ask for a king. So then you read this and you'll say, but wait a minute, now he's making an allowance for them to ask for a king. Well, why is that? Does God not know everything? So God had somewhere along the line informed Moses is that after you are dead and gone, they will ask for a king once they get into the promised land. And even when did that happen in the Old Testament? When did they finally ask for a king? After Moses. When did they finally ask for a king?
Solomon, right?
Before.
You mean you're talking about Saul when they asked for Saul?
First Samuel.
Yeah.
Samuel's the prophet.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, Eli and his sons have been killed because they were
And
wicked,
they
and
got mad and they said we need a king to rule us.
and they come to Samuel after all of his leading as a prophet, and they say, "We want a king because what was the
Everybody else
reason?
has one. Everybody else has one.
Everybody else has a king, so that's what we want." And Samuel wept all night long, and he thought because they were rejecting him, and God says to Samuel, He says, "What are you crying for?" He said, "They haven't rejected you; they've rejected me." He says, "They want a king. I'll give you a king." And so that's when he sends Saul, the son of Kish, to become the ruler of that. And he started off good. It's just he didn't finish well. And then after that again, he goes and he says to Saul, through Samuel, he says, "I pulled the kingdom away from you because I have found me a man after my own heart," which was David. And then Solomon comes along with that. But it was never God's intent that they should have a king. There is only one king. Who is it?
The Lord.
The Lord. And then the next chapter, 18, we get that because there's a prophecy of the prophet. And all the titles that goes through Christ, he is the priest, the high priest, he is the King of Kings, he is the Lord, the ruler of all those things. So he's all of that. And men keep trying to substitute for God. We just need God. It's like Ravenhill said, if you got God, you don't need anything else. If you don't have God, then you need everything else. And that's earthly and that's spiritual as well.
But why did he if God originally said you will have no king, and even he had said well, they were rejecting me, why would he go ahead and grant that?
His grace. Try to get your head around how
It's
much
just-
grace that God gives to us as our rebellion and all that.
I
They-
can't fathom the grace he gives one person.
Look-
It just doesn't make sense because it's just when it comes to a king and again he wants to be he is not wants to be, but he is the only king. Why would you grant having someone else that the people
well,
would
look,
listen
but
to?
again, when you read First, Second Samuel, First, Second Kings, First, Second Chronicles, look how much we learn of who God is. Again, you have wicked kings, and you learn about God's judgment, but you also read about good kings like David, Hezekiah, Josiah, and like that gives to you a picture of God's grace and God's mercy in that. It is a small thing. But that's not the only thing. I mean, they came to Jesus and they said, why did Moses give us a law of divorce? And he said, God's purpose and God's intent was what? I hate divorce. I never would have. But what did God say? Because I know your hearts. I know that you're going to ask a king. I don't want you to have a king, but I know you're going to ask for it. So God is preemptive in all these things, that He knows what's going to happen, and He knows our foolishness. So He's made allowance for that. Okay. All right. What did I get into? First phrase. When thou art come into the land which the Lord your God gives to possess, to dwell, and you say, I will set a king over me like all the other nations that are about me, you shall in any wise set him king over you, whom I choose, the Lord God chooses. One from among your brethren shalt thou set king over you. Thou mayest not set a stranger over you, which is not of your brother, which again, not of the tribes of Israel in that. So the line of Judah, after David and Solomon, they're all the ones that God chose. David, you will always have a son to sit upon the throne, and that shall come out from you. So all those kings in Judah are of God. Kings of Israel, no. They were from everywhere, and they were not the ones that God selected, especially people like Ahab that we read about. Verse 16, but he shall not multiply horses to himself, nor cause the people to return to Egypt, to the end that he should multiply horses. So again, here we go with the preemptive. What does God know is going to happen? What was one of the characteristics in regards to horses in the kings? Who had a lot of horses?
Saul? No. David.
Solomon. Solomon had gone and bought all these horses because he married Pharaoh's daughter.
Right.
So he was the son-in-law to Pharaoh, and they brought all these horses up. Remember, he kept all these chariots. He had all these horse stalls that is
I
described in
I
there.
remember the stalls.
And the Arabian horses out of Egypt.
I don't know if they're Arabian, but it's
Well,
just
that's
okay.
where those horses come from. These beautiful Arabian. I'm sorry, I just always. I don't know.
I'm not
Oh, my
adding to it. I'm
goodness.
just
I'm a horseman.
Hey, you solved the problem. Now we know.
now we
There
know
you go.
what kind of horses
That's
were they.
right.
Okay. You shall not multiply horses to yourself. God foreseeing, there's a lot here to do with Solomon and what he did in his wickedness. To that end that he should multiply horses. For as much as the Lord has said unto you, you shall henceforth return no more that way. So we just got done saying, after Zedekiah was carried away by Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon, what did the rest of the remnant that was left in Judah do? What did they do with Jeremiah?
Throw him in that cistern.
No, that's not what we said.
That's what I remember.
Where did they take him? They went back into Egypt.
Yeah, just so they went back.
And that's the reason that God said in the last chapters of Jeremiah from like 48 through 52, and he stood there at Taphanes in Egypt, and he said, the Lord said, dig in the wall and put this thing as the scroll, as a testimony that it will say is that all of Egypt shall be destroyed and given into the hands of Babylon because my people did not listen to me. When did they not listen? Right here. 500 years before it happened when he said, don't go back into Egypt. And what did they do? They went back into Egypt. What is the sin that is there? What's that sin? Of what? It's disobedience, but what kind? Rebellion.
Mom says backslide.
It is rebellion. When God says don't do it, and you say, watch me, I will, that's rebellion. What is our society filled with?
Pretty rebellious.
What is these, the kids, the battle with children today? Don't go there. Don't participate in this. And they do what?
Do it.
Oh, I wouldn't ever do that, but they turn around and do what? And this be some of you. Huh? They go right to it.
You're right.
It is that this generation, our generation. No. Every generation in what we're talking about from the 70s and the 80s, because before that, there was nothing to go to. You did chores and you went to bed.
Right.
No, there was no town to go to. There was no happenings except from the 60s and the 70s. Let me say, when Elvis come along.
50.
And now all that started of entertainment and trouble because indulgence, the drinking, the smoking, profanity, the fornication, sexual revolution, drugs. Look at the escalation from the 1960s on.
50s.
And if you went back again, the Great Depression, you didn't have money to go do it, and there wasn't nowhere to go. And if you did go to town, you went to the bar, and there was nothing but trouble that was waiting you there, right?
Yeah.
Which is the rule of thumb that I've always said to you guys. What? After 11 o'clock.
Nothing
Ain't no
Nothing-
good happens
nothing
after
good
11 o'clock
happens
when you're
after
out.
11 o'clock.
That's you can put that on my tombstone when I'm gone. The ambassador's epitaph. There ain't no good thing comes after 11 o'clock when
I
you're
have
out.
another question, and I'm gonna try to make sense of this because I don't even think it makes sense in my head. But so I like have a question, but I don't know. Like, okay, so like you have the wrath of God, and God, like, you know, when you disobey Him and you don't like. But then also, like, Satan has like his evil ways to do things. Like, do you think that people that don't know the word think that like that evil is God, but like not in a like I don't know how I'm trying to word it. Never mind.
Let me phrase it this way.
I'm like,
When all the evil, you remember what happened to Job?
Mhm.
Fire fell out of heaven, destroyed all of his livestock. robbers came, stole all the rest of his herd. Tornado came, knocked the four walls out, landed on his 10 children, killed all of them. Boils from the top of his head to the sole of his feet that he sat there with a scraper on the dunghill and that. And when all of his friends came and his wife, they said, who did it? There was no mention of Satan.
No,
Mm-mm.
no.
Everything was, you did this to yourself. Or God did this.
God did this to you.
No, like-
So God got the blame for what Satan did. Satan can't do any more than God allows him to do. So that's a part of that. Where does the judgment come from? Does God cause it? A non-believer that doesn't know anything about Satan is not going to blame Satan. They're going to blame God. God did this to me. Why do bad things always happen to good people? That's the same. That's the phrase everyone wants to ask. Well, the first thing is there are no good people.
That's right.
But the idea of that is that they want
Bad
to
things
blame
happen to
God.
all people.
And so that's the reason that they won't blame Satan and they won't blame themselves, but they'll blame God. God did this to me. What kind of God would do this? The children in Lamentations, that their mouths are so dry. What kind of God would not have compassion? And yet you read in chapter 3 of Lamentations that the Lord is great in his compassions. Great is his faithfulness. Great are his mercies. It's not God's desire, but God allows it and God causes it.
Isn't there a flip side to
Yeah,
that?
it just like yeah.
Okay.
You're,
I'm
yeah.
answering a question that I was never asked.
It's like hard again. It's like just my brain like
So the flip side that
Kinda.
I see is people of faith blame God also. You know, why did he let this happen to me? I mean, and they'll say, well, this must have been God's plan, blah, 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 blah. But they don't think that they don't remember that Satan's out there also.
Right.
see that's along kind of what I was like getting at. It's like it's
There are three causes. God does it, Satan does it, or we do it to ourselves. In the midst of that, some of those overlap. God may allow Satan to do it. God may do it to us because of what we did. Consequences for our choices, right? What you sow is what you reap.
Mm-hmm.
So those that sow to wickedness shall reap corruption. So this is a parallel of this. That's not always can you answer why did this happen?
But like, do you think sometimes like to say God does something? Do you think like if you question and think like, oh, maybe like Satan did that, and then you don't fully like grasp like why he did like why God did that because you think that Satan was trying to.
Like I said, you can't answer for every circumstance and situation, whether it was God or Satan in the midst of that. And so just to have an absolute that you say, oh, Satan did this, and that you do, then you're saying you're missing what God's trying to teach you. You know, you better be careful who you blame.
So, Rebecca, I had a friend who had a child that claimed that they were homosexual. And I said, well, you know the Bible says that this isn't the way things are supposed to be. And I said, when you've talked to him about it, what does he say? And he says that if I am divinely made and God doesn't make mistakes, then what's wrong with me? And my answer to that is the devil's still out there. So things happen to us, whether it be our fault, Satan's fault, or God's fault. It doesn't matter whose fault it is. It's what we do with what we're given.
And back to Romans 1 on that, because, yeah, no factoring there that the devil's still out there to lead people into that. But if you read Romans 1, where does this homosexuality come from? It says God gives them over to reprobate minds, that men lust after men and women stop doing that which is unseemly among themselves. God turns the mind, the earthly mind, over to this heathenism. this abomination in that. But God allowed it because of the wickedness of their hearts in that. It's not no clear answer for some of these things, but then in other things, it's pretty clear. This is the judgment of the Lord in the midst of that. Let me do 2 verses that I'll say. Linda?
We all have besetting sins, homosexual, whatever, and are we called to overcome? He's given us His mercy and His grace to overcome whatever it is in our life, whether it's homosexual or anger or whatever it may be.
But don't we have to repent?
The factor of that is like Ephesians 4, where he says, put off the old man. What we find today is these that say, but I don't want to put it off. I don't want to die to self and take up my cross. I want to live in my sin and still be saved. And this is the reason that they bring their sins into their relationship with Christ. You say, wait a minute, what was you saved from? Jesus saved me. Saved you from what? Did he save you from your profanity? Did he save you from your lust? Did he save you from your anger? Did he save? And what was you saved from? And what was you saved to? That question is not asked nor answered today when people said, "Oh, I got saved the other day." Oh, okay. What does that mean? Got saved from what? I got saved from hell. Well, that's one of the things, but we're saved from self. We are our worst enemy. You know, the sin that does so easily beset us is not your. My sin is not your sin. My sin is my sin that I have to die to and put down and give to Him, and let the blood of Christ cleanse and forgive. In that, and you don't hear much of that when we're talking about back to Western churches. You all get saved, get saved. Saved from what? Saved to what? And there's just no explanation of that. All right.
And are we continually being saved?
Yeah. Each day, you know, where Christ says that daily die to self, take up your cross. It's not one and done. All right, 17, left off in 16. Neither shall he multiply wives to himself, that his heart will not be turned away. That is an exact condemnation for who? No, what king? The king. We're talking about the king.
Solomon.
How many wives did Solomon have?
Hundreds.
Thousands.
Nobody knows specifically.
700 concubines.
And 300 wives.
Okay, and these concubines.
Now read this. The king was supposed to write out the book of Deuteronomy and read it and study it and know it. So here's God saying, don't multiply horses to yourself. Don't go back into Egypt. God is preemptive telling them, when you do these things, this is what I'm going to do. Do not multiply wives because they will turn your heart away. You think Solomon ever read that and think this is going to be my end result? Because I had, and again, you go over to 1 Kings, you go over to 1 Chronicles, and Solomon had these 700 concubines and 300 wives. And then you read what they did to him. In his old age, what happened to Solomon?
He worshipped other gods.
They turned his heart away from God.
Right.
Exact fulfillment of what God had said in 1500 BC, 500 years before it happened. Neither shall he greatly multiply to himself silver and gold. Condemnation. 1 Kings, 1 Chronicles. And you read is that Solomon made silver and gold as stones out in the yard. I mean, he increased it. All the gold shipments that he got out of Africa and all of that, and increased it. And again, the warning of riches and prosperity is what? What's the condemnation of that?
Lose your soul.
It causes you to forsake God. Because look what I've done. Look what I have. What's the condemnation on the Laodicean church over in Revelation 3?
I wish you were hot and cold, but not needed. Warm must be.
And why did that occur? You are increased in goods and have need of nothing, not even God. Where's America?
No.
We are increased with goods and have need of nothing, not even God. So from Deuteronomy to Solomon to Revelation, repeat behavior that we see here. And it shall be that when he sits upon the throne of his kingdom, that he shall write him a copy of this law in a book, out of that which is before the priests, the Levites. So clear instruction. When a king, which I don't want you to have a king, but I know you ain't going to listen to me, you're going to take a king. That king is supposed to write out the law and read it, study it, and know it. Now, we get over to the Kings and Second Chronicles. They had lost the book.
Yes.
In days of Hezekiah, the days of Josiah, they went into the temple and started cleaning out. Oh, we found the book. Well, they lost the book. What was the kings reading? Archie comics. They were reading everything but what they were supposed to be reading. That's a comic book, by the way. That's a out of date with that. So, all right, we'll stop there because I want to spend time with 19 and 20 before we go into chapter 18. All right, questions, comments on that? All right, those of you guys online, thanks for joining us. Follow along here for this evening. We're going to do our prayer time. I ask of you that as you log off, take your time to be in prayer we spent time before we went online to update the prayer list. So if you have additions or changes to that, let us know, and we'll have that updated for Sunday. All right. So closing out August, last few days, finish the month well so that you can start September well. And then as we go into the last 1/3 of this year, finish the year out. So good night and God bless you. Thursday night, hour of prayer at 7 o'clock.